This is House Planning Help episode 242. Hi there, I'm Ben Adam Smith, and this is the podcast for you if you're interested in self-build, because I'm exploring what houses we should be building in the 21st century and trying to break down the major roadblocks that may get in our way. Coming up in this session, my guest is Phil McGeevor, the chair of Cannock Mill Cohousing in Colchester. It's been a while since we looked at a co-housing project, so I'm looking forward to this. We're not strictly a podcast about co-housing projects, however, we do love them. So when we get the opportunity, and I thought, well, since I haven't done this for a while, let's see what's going on. This one just about complete. Also, Marmalade Lane, which we actually featured a podcast from probably a couple of years ago when it was all just an idea. They've moved in there. And one of the things that I wanted to mention is perhaps we look at co-housing because it's another way of delivering not only great housing, but communities as well. It's got so much going for it. And so perhaps you're finding it hard on the self-build journey. Just remember, this is another option, and it's great. You'll hear all the different teams and groups that get established, and then perhaps they break up or move on to the next phase of the project. So that's quite an interesting aspect of co-housing. Of course, you're meeting, working with all these people, and then you're going to be living with them as well. So it's a really interesting, almost pre-community before the real thing actually happens. And as we say frequently on this podcast, one of the best ways to learn, get out on site, look at finished projects, and they often have open days, such a giving, sharing, friendly community. And I mentioned that Marmalade Lane one, which is only just finished, and I'm sure we promote a number of different things on our social media platforms. And that was one of the things we just saw an event that they're already opening the door, say, come and have a look around. So don't write it off. Keep an open mind. Go around. You never know. This could be exactly what you've been looking for. So let's get to our featured interview with Phil McGeevor, the chair of Cannock Mill Cohousing in Colchester. I asked for a few tip-offs from those that be, and they said, this one is looking good. So how did it all begin?
Well, about 11 or 12 years ago, a small group of people had walking holidays together, and they got talking about the problems their own parents were facing in terms of their choices, in terms of thinking of downsizing or care and the rest of it, and didn't really like the choices that were available. And I think in consequence, one of them, an architect, Dan Thorne, knew about co-housing, had heard of co-housing, and they got discussing it. And I think they probably talked about it for quite a while and then decided if they were going to do it, they had to bring some more people in. It needed to be bigger than that small group. And my wife and I were part of that first wave in, which was 2007.
What attracted you to co-housing?
Well, I'd never heard of it, frankly. We had an email from a friend from years ago who was part of that group. I think my wife she'd cut out something from the paper, but I just went along out of interest, but immediately thought, this is a wonderful idea. This is so good on so many levels, and was immediately very enthusiastic and keen to take it forward.
What aspects, though? Because co-housing is multifaceted, so explain how you see it.
Well, I loved the idea of being able to build not just a house, but a community. I liked the design ideas of our architect, and we agreed right from the start it would be to Passive House standards, if that was at all possible. I liked some of the eco aspects of being able to share, not having 23 lawnmowers and the rest. It seemed a very sensible thing. And I like the combination of the privacy of your own house, but the connection to the common house, in the mill in our case, and to your neighbours. And through making decisions together, I thought that was just a good way to live.
It sounds like you got your architects on board very early in the process.
Yes, I mean, we didn't start it off and saying Anne must be our architect, but I think we always needed that expertise, the ability to look at a site and say, okay, these are the problems with this site, but this might be a possible solution. This is what we could build on there. Is that along the lines you're thinking. And you've got to realise in co-housing that finding a site is not the work of a few months, it's the work of years, and is the most difficult phase of all, quite possibly, because each site you look at, you raise your expectations, you spend a little bit of money thinking what's possible on it, and then you can, your hopes can be dashed very, very easily. It's very hard to get in front of a developer and bid seriously and win the bid for a site.
So maybe you could explain just one site. You mentioned you've got to spend a bit, even just assessing it. What needs to happen then? Are we talking about some simple designs? Anything else we need to know about?
No, I think, some searches on it. We were fortunate in the skill set of our group, so we had people who could do most of the things, and we did do these things on a shoestring. I'm sure if Anne had been called into another group and been asked to do initial sketches, initial ideas, it would have cost them rather more than it cost us. But we always wanted to maintain a professional relationship with Anne and keep those, if you like, paper walls within it. If you're a co-housing, you're almost certainly going to have a site that is not easy to build on, right? Because someone else will have snatched those up. So it's going to probably have a listed building. It may be on a slope. It may need groundworks of a substantial nature. It's almost certainly not going to be your flat football pitch with a road at the end of it.
I don't think any sites are ever like that, or not that I've come across in self-build as well. So how big was your geographic search area?
Oh, huge. We said 90 minutes of London, which can take you an awful long way. I think the furthest out we got was Stroud. There's already some co-housing there, and we seriously looked at some sites there. But the choice sort of came down to, if you're within striking distance of London, do you want somewhere that is essentially a commuter town where people get up in the morning and get on a train and go somewhere else? Or do you want something that has its own centre of gravity? And we liked Colchester because we felt it had that. It had really a thriving town centre, a university. It was its own little locus of activity.
And given the demographic of your group, nobody's going to be commuting to London, are they?
Well, we still have people who are working, and we didn't think it would take this long. So
I guess there is that.
So it looked, certainly in the early days, I mean, for most of the time, more than half of our members have been working, and we still have a substantial, now a minority of members who are working, but yeah.
I know from my own experience that it took longer. I thought it would take, or hoped it would take 4 years, and it took 6 years. So what were you thinking at the outset? This seems to be a trait with co-housing. Did you have that grounding that it was going to take a long time? I mean, what is a long time?
Well, I remember when we sat down to discuss it, I think in 2008, that we all decided that 2013 was the right time. Okay, and it's clearly taken more than twice as long as that to do. I think groups, seriously, if the horizon is more than 5 years away, that's an awful long time. But once you're in it, you just keep going.
You're looking at a site together as a group. How do you decide it's the right site then? This is obviously, it has been a big struggle for you.
Well, it's a mixture of the hard-headed factual stuff. So the size of the site, the constraints on it, the planning permissions, what you think you can build, what you think the site will go for, because those two things are obviously related. And then there's just the emotional thing. How do you feel about this site? And I remember very well with this site, we saw it on a wet November day, and the site is pretty wet and boggy. but looking at it and thinking, yeah, this could be beautiful. This could be lovely, and other people feeling the same. So I think it's left and right brain, this business.
Can you describe the site?
Well, it's I think just over 2 acres. The most prominent feature is at the front a 3-storey Victorian mill, but a mill has been there since the 14th century, I'm sure. It has a mill pond behind it, so if you like, the level behind the mill is 1 floor up to allow for the drop where the wheel was. And then there is a slope, quite a steep slope, so the bank of the mill pond was up the slope, and then it carries up. So I think there's a 9-metre drop from one end of the site to the other. It's I wouldn't say long and thin, but it's not a square site. So our design is essentially some flats connected to the mill in an L shape around the pond, and essentially a terrace in 3 blocks of houses in a large curve. Again, following the lines of the mill, which is a long tadpole shape, as mill ponds often are. So that the front of the houses are very clearly 3-storey houses, but it's built into the slope. So although there isn't a floor below ground level, in fact, when you're up on top, you see the top 2 stories rather than the bottom story from what will be our shared garden.
So were you able to almost lean into the constraints a bit here? Were there any other constraints? It sounds like actually how it developed was not too tricky.
I'm not sure about that.
Were there lots of other opportunities on that site then, of ways that you could have had?
Well, the planning permission that had been given was for a series of, separate houses dotted around, which I don't think could have worked. I really don't. We wanted, as co-housing schemes do, they don't want lots of land used for individual drives and the like. They want a shared sense of space where you interact. Following the contours of the slope, I think any good architect would have done that. And it does make me appreciate, lots of people have said, oh, why didn't you just buy a kit build or the rest of it? And I think with a site like ours, something more bespoke was pretty much essential. That's my view anyway. And that's all what we've been happy with, something that works in that setting, in that landscape, that maximises the views and the interaction.
This site came with planning permission. Firstly, how did you find the site? What was the tip-off? Or who was selling it?
Well, that's the easy question.
Which one?
Who was selling it? The site, in addition to the mill, has a rather imposing Victorian house on it. And there was someone who lived in that who was very well known locally. I think Wally Locke was his name. And he had essentially restored the mill, or kept it going, I think probably in the late 50s, early 60s. And his children had inherited it, and the daughter ran an aquatics business in the ground floor of the mill. The upstairs had been used for parties and social events and things like that, but wasn't in use at the time. So they were selling it, and it'd clearly been advised that you'll get more money if you get planning permission. So they'd got an architect in and got that. That was who was selling it. How we heard about it, I think it was quite by chance. An email. Obviously we were keeping our eyes open for sites, but I think 2 of our members received an email at the same time alerting them to this one, and we decided we would go and have a look at it, and that was it then.
How are you financing this?
Well, the vast majority of it, we're financing it directly ourselves, but we have potentially up to 4.5 million developer's loan from Homes England. So I think we were the first co-housing group. They stepped up and helped, but they helped it through the vehicle that was meant for developers who might build on a site that would otherwise not be economical. You know, they wouldn't get the private finance for, and they could step in, charging a very decent rate of interest, of course. But the most of the money has come from us as individuals. So the big hurdle is buying the site, because until you've actually got a site, you know, it can't go any further, can it? So that site was just over £1 million, and 13 of us put the money in to buy that site. So I guess it was a mixture of people who had savings or pension pots, or had perhaps offset mortgages on their existing properties, or, you know, however, a variety of means.
And what year are we up to when you bought the site?
I think it's 4 years ago now. It was finally done. I think
it
took a year to buy it.
Yeah, you're mentioning perhaps a 12-year process if you're in on day one. Well, a lot of that was the site and nailing it down, wasn't it? And then things really got moving.
Yes, the business of shall we buy it or not, you know, putting a bid in, would it be accepted, nothing happening, that went on for a considerable time. And then, of course, there is the once you have the site, then taking it through planning takes a while.
Any other bids?
No. No.
One was enough.
I think. Yeah. Are you saying, did we make other bids
on the pieces of land?
No, we didn't actually put any money down. We did all the work, and but we didn't actually step up and say, we're offering you this for that. I think it had to be a site. I mean, that is the really big break point for a co-housing group, because you've often got lots of people who are discussing their dreams, essentially, and how they want it to be. But at that moment, it becomes real. It's a site in Essex, in Colchester. And if we're going to do this, you are going to have to put some serious money into this. And we lost a few members at that point, as you would expect. But we had enough to take it forward.
And I'm intrigued as well, obviously, in a long process like this, you're always going to have members coming in, members coming out. But given the demographic, do you think there has been a bit more patience in there, that they see this as their retirement, their place that they want to be? Or was it still everyone's got their own agenda? And
I'm not sure we were more patient than another group would be. I personally find it very difficult to think how, you know, someone mid-career, young family or something could put in the amount of work that we've been able to put in. I think anyone who does that, and some groups have, I have to say I'm just amazed at admiration. Were we more patient? No, I think we're desperate to get in. We're desperate, we want to be there. But it's how you express your impatience, isn't it? And maybe that maturity helped us control that frustration.
Let's talk a little bit about what you wanted from these houses then. So you're developing your plans. We know the rough configuration. What did you want from these homes?
I think we wanted something that would be beautiful to live in. And we wanted something, I think all of us were keen on the energy efficiency of them. So that was it, really, I think. The architect, as I said, it had a very good sense of what we were looking for, an overall design brief. And I think if you look at that now, you can tick most of those boxes. One of the issues then, I suppose, was the size of the units. We have 6 1- and 2-bedroomed flats, and then we have a series of 2-bedroomed houses, and then some 3-bedroomed houses. And the balance between those was always, do we need more of those or less of those? And that changed. Initially, the group, most of the people seemed to want 3-bedroomed houses. In retrospect, 2-bedroomed is quite a good offer for a co-housing group of our demographic.
I think one of the key things that I've seen from co-housing groups is actually making sure your guest accommodation is good and there's enough of it. That's almost the trickier one, perhaps, is it? Or do you like to have families staying with you?
No, well, this has been tackled in, if you like, in 2 different ways. There are 2 guest rooms in the mill itself, so, we can have visitors using that. But each of the 3-bedroomed houses, they're 3-story, and on the bottom floor there is, you could call it a garage or a studio, but then there is a bedroom and ensuite at that level. And then the next floor there are 2 bedrooms, and it's an upside-down house, as it were, kitchen, living room on the top. So, if you like, that bottom space makes it very easy to have guests, and I'm quite sure if our neighbours had, more people coming than they could accommodate, someone else would say, well, they can have this. And we've also talked about if we were having an event there and people needed to stay, we could not utilise just the guest rooms in the mill, but also some of the other accommodation.
Have you interacted with any of the other co-housing groups along the way, maybe on a small scale or perhaps more permanently in touch?
Oh, yeah. I think it's been vital that we had visited other schemes. One of our members has pretty much done a grand tour of staying in them and learning from them and advising us on their sense of this works, and we had difficulty with that. So no, you can learn a huge amount from going round, and I think it's essential. As I said, every group thinks it's invented the wheel and the right way of doing it, but you can pick and mix from the different groups what you like and what you think will work for you, because every group is slightly different.
What's been the biggest challenge then on this journey?
Well, right, there's 2 huge challenges. One is finding a site, and anything that could be done to make that easier would give a huge boost to co-housing. Second is finding the finance. You have to have an awful lot of money up front in order to do something like this. I naively thought, well, most of the people have housing equity. Surely that capital can be accessed in some way as security, and we'll be able to do that, but it's much harder than that. So I suppose those 2 things, plus the sense of exemplars, this, look how they've done it, this is exciting, this works. I think if you've got those 3 things together, that will get you through those challenges.
So it's a tender process that you went through to select a main contractor for this project.
Yeah.
Who did you hire and why did you hire them?
We hired a company called Jerome Falkus, who were well-established East London company, going for more than 100 years. We did the due diligence on them. We didn't want a contractor who made a great bid and then went bankrupt, and we felt they had the skill set. They hadn't actually built passive houses, but I think they'd built a passive house school, and we felt comfortable with them, which is not to say they weren't very, very tough in negotiations, as one would expect. And that they were just about the best price, and we felt they had strengths that the other bidders didn't have.
Did anything come out of the project? You got your price back, or were you able to get all the works done for a fairly good figure?
No, it came out.
So what was sacrificed considerably?
Not a lot. Our own money was sacrificed.
Oh, okay.
Is the truth.
You paid more, right?
We paid more. Right. And the issue was always the groundworks. You know, this is a difficult site. That's where all the risk is. The geology told us it was difficult. And yeah.
What was it? What was your soil, and how have, you know, that's all behind you now?
Well, yeah, I think it's a mixture of layers of clay and shale with quite a lot of natural springs. So the first contract we signed with Jerome Falkus was for some groundworks. So French drains to bring it in, and the water is quite a strong feature of the site. So to bring that water down through rain gardens into the mill pond was very much part of it. But that's a serious bit of engineering in the background behind the rather nice aesthetic of the site.
What type of foundation is it?
No, I should know more about this, but it's very deeply piled. And
that's all right.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I wasn't on the building group. But
what about the? I love the way all these groups. It's fascinating. So, do you just get a sense of trust between all these different groups? You know, the land group, or does someone jump from the land group into? Oh, actually, I'm interested in design now.
Well, people move about, and there is some overlap, and we all come together as an executive but most of the decisions are taken, in fact all of the decisions are taken as a whole group of the board.
Put to the vote?
Yes, sometimes, but perhaps less often than you would imagine. If there's an area where there is not obviously a consensus, we normally just do some more work on it and come back round. And very, very rarely do we have to take it to a vote. I can't remember a time where there's been people saying, well, all right, I'm in a minority, but I can see you can go ahead with this, but this is what I think. Everyone has always come round to share that view. So the trust in a group is essential, and it's something you do everything you can to preserve and develop, because you know it's going to be really important for the long-term success of how you live there. And I'm just amazed that a group of people who mostly didn't know each other until they got involved with this can develop such a high-level trust. And of course it's an incredibly efficient mechanism, trust, compared to trying to tie each other up in contracts or red tape. And it's worked very well for us.
Has it got easier, or is it just something that you were natural at the beginning?
Has what got easier?
Making those decisions and being in these groups, because you get a bit of practice.
Oh, yes. Yeah, definitely. Making decisions has got easier. We know who knows more about it than we do. So we know we must listen to so-and-so on a tax question or a finance question, and so on a building question, and the like. So unlike some places, we quite like experts. We have some faith in them. But it's always connected to explaining and why we're doing it. And we have got much better at where there's an initial, some people want to go down this road and others another one. We have mechanisms for dealing with that. So sometimes we would go all around the table and say what we thought, but increasingly we sort of take it out of that meeting. We set up what we call a wiki, of where people put down their views and comment on those views, and maybe get someone to summarize that and bring that back. And that's worked remarkably well for us so far. The thing is, when you're saying about a high level of trust, but there's also a high level of, if you're going to come out of this without taking a huge financial hit, if you're going to be successful in this, you have to work together. You have to find compromises. It's been an absolute lesson in life to do it. Yeah,
it always fascinates me, that side of co-housing. Let's move back to the build system then that you're using for this project. Which way are we going? So we've got piled foundations.
Yeah, and then timber frames and airtight membranes with very high levels of very thick walls, very high levels of insulation, with materials that was seen to be ecologically sound and not toxic if there was ever a fire or anything. So.
What will it look like then? What's the cladding or finish of the...
Well, the finish is a render, so a render that's dyed through, so not just painted on the outside, and it's different shades of terracotta, or, we put a palette of colours into the planners, and one they didn't like. They didn't like a green, we suggested, but apart from that, they accepted it. They have a deep green roof, a living roof on the top, and the if you like, the front of the houses all look down over the mill pond towards the mill itself, and at the back there are balconies that, because of the slope, these are at the top of the house, are level or just above level with the shared gardens. So they feel very, very close. There is a walkway along the balconies, so it has quite a neighbourly feel with your immediate neighbours, who, of course, you know already.
Yeah, that's another good thing, isn't it, over time? So just going back to all these people then, you're all in different locations. Presumably no one's even living near Colchester at the moment, or, very few amount of people. So how have you done most of these meetings? Is it over the internet? Is it just hiring a room somewhere?
No.
How are you keeping track of things?
Okay, well, we started off being spread about mostly London. But as soon as we got the site, we started to attract people who either lived in Colchester or the environments. And then some of our members, in anticipation of moving in, have sold their properties wherever they were and are now renting in Colchester prior to moving in. Our meetings originally used to take place in London. Once we had the site, we initially used to meet in the mill itself, which was great, to go in there and see it and have a sense of the space. And then once we'd handed that over to the contractors, we hire the local hall and we meet there once a month. If possible, we have a site visit. We don't visit between times, apart from people who are absolutely on the building group who are working with the builders. So, we're fairly disciplined about that. Occasionally we'll have a meeting in London, but increasingly we have more of our members live in that area anyway. So, and I think we, once a month to go out to Colchester, see the site, and then sit down and do the business. We have, as you're aware now, we have a lot of subgroups, and they meet wherever. They meet in houses, usually over some lunch or something like lunch, and they can be anywhere.
Which groups were you involved with?
Well, the groups have changed quite a bit. So I've been quite active in the membership. I sit on the finance group, and shall I tell you what the groups are?
I was just going to ask that. I was very close to saying, shall I just ask you what the groups are?
Okay, well, since we've had the site, we've had a building group, a finance group, a legal group, though legal and finance sometimes meet together, a communications group who deal with our newsletters and external communications as well as internal communications, and a membership group, though that's just about organising, someone who's new coming in and making sure all that's working. Now, in the last year or so, we have then had to establish a whole series of groups about different aspects of living in the mill. So we now have a gardening group, and we have a different group looking at different aspects of life in the mill. So yesterday I'm part of the kitchen group in the mill. So we were looking at the equipment we've got to buy and costing that, and bringing ideas back to the board for that. So there's, for each floor of the mill, essentially, there is a group looking at that.
What does it feel like? This has been a long journey and you are very, very close now to moving in. There will be things to do, I'm sure, as ever, but it's real.
It's very real, and I'm incredibly conscious of the next few months, how much has to happen. People often say to me, you must be so excited by this, but you can't stay excited for 10 years, It would, I really don't know. I want us to be in there. I want that to be well planned and go as smoothly as it can. I know there will be difficulties and obstacles to get through, but I'm confident from our past experience of how we've tackled those that we will get through them. And I'm looking forward to, say, looking back after the first year in there, that the first 6 months are going to be a little up and down, I think. But I think in a year's time, come and ask me again.
I think what you've got to do is definitely try and engineer even little bits of time just to look at what you're doing when you're in there. When you're handed the keys or all of that sort of thing. It's a wonderful moment. It goes very quickly. So try and get a bit of extra time there. One question that has been on my mind is that in some co-housing groups, when they have a fairly mixed demographic, they always say that it's good for the older generations because they're with the younger generations. So is that a concern of yours at all, that this group is obviously very much an older demographic?
No, because I don't think this is going to be a child-free zone. We have children and grandchildren and things. I mean, the difference it has made, and as I say, we've never said you can't join us unless you're over a certain age or under a certain age. But I think the difference it's made is in terms of perhaps the design choices. If we were multi-generation, had teenage children there would be different design choices in the mill and in the grounds and things. So essentially we're designing it around this, actually, we are intergenerational. If your age range is from 50 to 90, you've got a 2.5, 3 generations, haven't you? But we've designed it around those interests. So if you like, there will be a high chair there for visiting grandchildren, not for everyday lots of children running round. Is my guess. So people aren't suddenly going to not see their families and friends, and I don't see it as a problem.
Is there any one thing that you feel, I need to tell this to the next co-housing group? Yes, they've done all their research, but what is that one thing that would really help them? It can be more than one if it makes life easier.
I mentioned earlier getting over each of those hurdles. So there's tips about finding a site, and that has become a little easier now, I think, with the community land trusts and the like. It would be great if there was a financial model to help people. But essentially, I think I would be rather robust in telling them that a tooth fairy isn't going to come down and do it for you. Nobody is going to say, I'd love to finance this for you and it'll be terribly cheap for you and, it will all be wonderful. You have control of it yourself, but, you have to do it. You have to raise that money. It is a pretty hard-headed commercial thing in the end. It wouldn't get built otherwise. A contractor is going to look very seriously at you to see that you have the means to do it, and certainly the finance, but I think also the skills. And you need to get those things lined up.
Well, Phil, really appreciate your time and telling the story, and I can't wait to hear what it's like once you're in. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I've enjoyed it. Cheers.
Head online to take a look at the show notes for this one today at houseplanninghelp.com/242. You can review all the main information again. We provide you with a summary. We've also got some photos and a look at what the site is like so you can see how it's developed, where all the houses are going. Sometimes describing it in audio, it's not enough, is it? So we make sure we fill out the show notes. If you've got a comment or you'd like to ask a question, couple of ways you can do this. You can scroll down to the bottom of the show notes and leave your comment there, or you can get social. And I think I'm right in saying that Cannock Mill Cohousing's on Twitter. So there's a link to that in the show notes, to their website as well, where you can contact them, houseplanninghelp.com/242. Couple of things to finish up with. First of all, going down in the hub, we have our monthly conference calls. And this is where we get together. And what we like to do is bring on an expert that we can probe. Sometimes we'll have a specific topic that we're going to talk about. It's just a learning session. And we've got Mark Brinkley, the author of the House Builder's Bible, coming along to join us on this month's call. How awesome is that? If you haven't got a copy of the book, it's one of the best out there, or shall I say the best out there. So go and take a look. The House Builder's Bible. We've got Mark on the call this month. So maybe there's still time. If you're listening to this as it gets published, then you can still become a hub member and join our call and fire some questions at Mark. He's a really friendly guy, knowledgeable as well, and he's come off the back of his own project. So we're really looking forward to having him here. If you've missed him, don't forget we've got lots of other experts lined up, and we're always trying to make sure that these sessions help. We've got our weekly office hours as well, where I turn up and for an hour I will field any questions that you've got about your projects. Perhaps I can pass you a contact. Maybe it will be a resource that I know about. It's just nice when you're at the end of your project. I now want to help you. So if you're one of our hub members, then that's another way, along with the in-depth video case studies, the courses, and the forum where you can keep track of your progress. It's a digital resource, an archive, a little gem, houseplanninghelp.com/join to find out more. And finally, I haven't mentioned it today, my garden fund. Yes, I'm going to be mentioning it a bit because I quite like a garden. And one of the things, if you build a house, you get to a stage where the money is pretty tight. Hopefully it's very late on in the process. You know, if you're brilliant or you're rolling in money, then maybe the garden's looking fantastic straight away. However, I want to drum up some funds to make sure our landscaping plan is not just an idea that will take 10 or 20 years to make happen. It would be great if we could make it happen in the next couple of years. So at Regen Media, we're always producing videos. We like to keep it in construction and ideally in ecological construction, because that's what we're trying to do, promote really good buildings that are good for the planet, healthy, comfortable, you know where we're at. So if there's something video-wise or perhaps even marketing-wise, we know how to get website traffic, then maybe come to us at Regen Media. We'll put a link in the show notes too. That is your lot. Thank you so much for being there. The House Planning Help podcast is produced by Regen Media. Content that matters.